She thought she was too old to be wanted. The cowboy said, "You've been worth waiting for." Maria had always thought that life had already given her all it was going to. At 48, she lived alone in a small town that seemed almost frozen in time. The streets were quiet, lined with old brick buildings and modest houses, and there was a comforting predictability in everything around her. She had never married, and although she had friends who loved her dearly, she had spent most of her adult life in the company of books, work, and routines. Maria had a gentle beauty that had not faded entirely, but she had stopped noticing it in herself. She often felt invisible, like she existed quietly on the edges of the world, while others moved forward with vibrant lives filled with love, adventure, and excitement. Her days were simple but satisfying in a quiet way. Each morning she would wake up before the sun, brew a cup of strong coffee, and sit by her small kitchen window. From there she could watch the town slowly come to life. Children walked to school. Neighbors greeted each other warmly as they left their homes, and the mail carrier always paused to wave. Maria would smile at the familiar routine, but deep down, she sometimes felt a pang of loneliness. She would sip her coffee slowly, letting the warmth seep into her hands and her chest, thinking about the life she had built for herself.
A life that was peaceful, yes, but solitary. After her morning coffee, Maria would get ready for work at the library.
She loved her job, not just because it provided her with a steady income, but because it allowed her to live among books, stories, and knowledge. The library was a cozy building with tall wooden shelves, soft lighting, and the smell of old paper that somehow felt comforting. She knew every nook and cranny of the library, every shelf, every book, and she took pride in keeping it organized and welcoming for the townspeople. Children loved visiting the library after school, and Maria always made time to read to them or recommend a good book. Though she cherished these small joys, she often returned home feeling a quiet emptiness, wishing for someone who would see her as more than just the librarian. Maria's friends tried to encourage her from time to time, hinting that maybe it was not too late for her to find someone special. They would invite her to social gatherings, to dinner parties, or even to casual weekend trips, always insisting that she deserved companionship and love. But Maria had grown used to her quiet life, and the idea of dating, especially at her age, felt intimidating. Banderas, she had seen love stories around her, and many had ended happily, yet she could not shake the feeling that those days were long behind her. She had lived through heartbreaks in her youth, watched friends find partners, and felt the slow passing of years. Now, the thought of putting herself out there made her anxious. She had created walls around her heart, thinking they were protecting her, when in fact they were keeping her from experiencing something beautiful. Even though Maria thought she was too old to be desired, she carried herself with a quiet dignity. Her home was neat, filled with simple decorations and personal touches that reflected her personality. A small vase of fresh flowers always sat on her dining table, and photographs of family and friends adorned her walls. She enjoyed cooking simple meals for herself, baking occasionally, and tending to a small garden in her backyard. The garden was her pride, a tiny oasis of color and life, where roses, tulips, and sunflowers grew under her careful attention. The garden reminded her that life still had beauty to offer, even if she had convinced herself otherwise.
On many evenings, Maria would settle into her favorite armchair by the fireplace, a soft blanket around her shoulders, and a cup of tea in her hand.
She would read a novel, sometimes a mystery, sometimes a romance, and allow herself to escape into the lives of others. She loved seeing characters find happiness, overcome challenges, and discover love. But often, after closing a book, she felt the stark contrast with her own life. She had no romantic partner, no one to share quiet moments with, no one to hold her hand as the world went on outside.
These thoughts would sometimes make her feel melancholy, but she would remind herself that she was content in her own company.
Still, the longing never fully disappeared. The town around her was familiar and comforting, but it also reinforced her feelings of isolation. Many of her neighbors had families, partners, or grandchildren, and Maria often felt like an observer in their lives rather than a participant. She would smile and engage in polite conversation when she ran errands, but she rarely ventured beyond what was necessary. The small cafe on the corner, the weekly farmers market, and the local park were the few places she occasionally visited to interact with others. Even in these spaces, she sometimes felt invisible, unnoticed, as though she had become a background figure in the lives of those around her. Despite this, Maria was not lonely in every sense. She had friends who called or visited regularly, neighbors who stopped by for a chat, and a community that respected her. She had also cultivated hobbies that brought her joy. Her love for reading was her constant companion, and she spent hours exploring new books, discovering authors she had never heard of, and revisiting old favorites. She kept a small journal where she wrote her thoughts, recorded events, and sometimes reflected on her feelings. Writing helped her make sense of her emotions and provided a sense of connection to the world beyond her quiet town. One of Maria's favorite aspects of her life was the changing seasons. She loved the crisp air of autumn, when the leaves turned shades of red and gold, and the early snowfalls in winter that blanketed the town in white. Spring brought hope with blooming flowers and longer days, while summer offered warmth and sunlight that made even ordinary moments feel alive. She often took long walks through the countryside, enjoying the sounds of birds, the rustle of leaves, and the smell of fresh earth. These walks were her time to think, to reflect, and sometimes to imagine what life could have been if she had made different choices. Maria had learned to accept her solitude with grace, but a part of her still hoped for something more. She had dreams she had never pursued, a life she had imagined in her youth that seemed distant now. She remembered the days when she thought love would come easily, when she had believed in fairy tale romances and happy endings. Those dreams had faded with time, replaced by practicality, routine, and the belief that she had passed the age when someone could truly desire her. Yet deep down she held a quiet hope, almost like a fragile ember that life might still surprise her. Her evenings often ended with her sitting on the porch, watching the sunset over the hills. The sky would turn shades of orange, pink, and purple, and she would feel a sense of peace in the world around her. It to herself, acknowledging that she was grateful for her life, for the calm, for the beauty in simple moments. And yet in those quiet evenings, when the stars began to appear one by one, she could not ignore the feeling that something was missing. She longed for companionship, for someone to share stories with, for laughter that came from a shared joke, and for warmth that was not just from the fire in her home, but from another heart beside hers. Though Maria thought she was too old to be wanted, life had a way of teaching lessons when least expected. She had lived carefully, built a safe life, and avoided risks, but the universe often had surprises in store for those who remained patient and open to possibilities. Maria did not yet know it, but her quiet, predictable life was on the cusp of a change, an encounter that would awaken feelings she had long forgotten and challenge her beliefs about love, desire, and the beauty of being seen. Until that day arrived, Maria continued her routine, savoring small joys, taking pride in her work, and nurturing the simple pleasures that made life meaningful. She did not rush, did not despair, and did not give up on the idea that something extraordinary could still happen, even at 48, even after decades of quiet living. Life, she realized, had a rhythm of its own, and sometimes the most unexpected moments brought the most profound happiness. And so, Maria's days flowed quietly, filled with books, gardens, walks, and reflections, each moment a gentle reminder that life, though simple, was hers to live. She may have thought she was invisible, unwanted, and too old to matter, but in truth, she was exactly where she needed to be, waiting for a chapter of her life that was about to begin. It was a bright, crisp autumn morning when something unusual happened at the library. Maria had arrived early, as she always did, unlocking the old wooden doors and letting in the soft morning light. The smell of polished wood and old books filled the air, comforting her, as she began her day. She moved through the familiar rows of shelves, straightening books and checking for any that were out of place. Everything was normal, until she heard the sound of the front door opening.
A man walked in, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing worn jeans, a plaid shirt, and a cowboy hat that tilted slightly over his eyes.
Maria paused for a moment, adjusting her glasses as she studied him.
He had a rugged appearance with tan skin from working outdoors and hands that looked strong from years of labor.
But there was something gentle in his eyes and the way he smiled when he looked around the library, as if he were careful not to disturb the quiet peace of the place. "Good morning," he said in a deep, calm voice.
I'm looking for some books on local history and maybe a few on ranch management. I've got a project I'm working on at the ranch, and I could use some guidance."
Surprised. Maria blinked, a little surprised. People did not usually come into the library asking about ranch management. Most visitors were children, students, or elderly residents browsing novels or newspapers. She smiled politely, straightening the stack of books she was holding. "Well, you've come to the right place," she said, her voice steady despite a flutter in her chest. "We have several books on local history, and I can help you find anything related to ranching or farming." "Follow me, please." He nodded appreciatively and followed her through the aisles. Maria led him to a section filled with books on regional history, old maps, and agricultural guides. As she handed him a few volumes, he thanked her and started flipping through them with careful attention. "I'm Luke," he said, introducing himself properly this time. "I just moved my cattle ranch a few miles from here. I wanted to learn more about the area before I start planning anything." Seems like a lot of history I don't know about yet. Maria noticed the way he spoke. Calm, sincere, with an almost quiet excitement. There was no arrogance or boastfulness in his tone. She found herself curious about him and his life.
"I'm Maria," she replied.
"I've lived here most of my life, and I manage the library. It's nice to meet someone interested in learning about our town."
You'll find a lot of fascinating stories in these books.
Luke's eyes lit up as he examined the pages, occasionally asking questions about old ranches, historical events, and local traditions.
Maria answered patiently, explaining details and even sharing a few anecdotes that weren't in the books. As they talked, she noticed the gentle rhythm of his presence. He wasn't in a hurry. He seemed to genuinely enjoy learning, listening to her, and engaging in conversation. Over the next hour, they discussed everything from the town's earliest settlers to the changing seasons and how the land had been used over generations. Luke listened intently, nodding, asking thoughtful questions, and occasionally chuckling at Maria's witty observations. She felt a spark of connection she hadn't felt in a long time. There was no pressure, no expectation, just two people talking, learning, and enjoying each other's company. Before leaving, Luke asked, "Do you have any recommendations for novels about ranch life or stories set in the countryside?"
Something that gives me a sense of what it's really like.
Maria smiled, feeling a little thrill of excitement. This was her territory, her world, and she loved sharing it.
She led him to the fiction section and picked out a few books that captured the essence of life on a ranch, the struggles of farmers and the beauty of the land. "You'll enjoy these," she said, handing them to him. "They're not just about work. They're about life, people, and the choices we make. They might give you a better sense of the heart behind ranching." Luke accepted the books with a warm smile. "Thank you, Maria. I appreciate it. I'll be sure to return them soon. If I don't read them all in one sitting, best." The corners of Maria's lips lifted in a small, genuine smile. She felt lighter than she had in years. There was something different about this encounter, something that felt like the start of a story that had just begun. After that morning, Luke began visiting the library regularly. Sometimes he came to borrow books, other times just to ask Maria questions about the town, farming, or life in general. Each visit was short at first, but over time their conversations grew longer. They shared coffee in the small library kitchen, talking about everything from favorite books to childhood memories. Luke's stories of ranch life fascinated Maria, and she found herself laughing more than she had in years. Presence brought warmth and color to her previously quiet routine. As autumn deepened, the visits became more frequent and more personal. Luke began noticing the small details about Maria's life, the way she arranged flowers in the library, her careful attention to organizing shelves, the kindness she showed to children and visitors. He admired her dedication, her intelligence, and the quiet strength she carried without ever boasting. Maria, in turn, began noticing Luke in ways she hadn't expected. She admired his work ethic, his respect for others, and the way he seemed comfortable in his own skin. There was a calmness about him, a patience that was rare in people she had met before. And though she had convinced herself she was too old to be desired, she felt a subtle flutter when he smiled at her or when he listened attentively to what she had to say. One afternoon, Luke stopped by the library with a small loaf of bread he had baked himself. "I thought you might like this," he said, placing it gently on her desk. "It's from a family recipe. My grandmother used to make it all the time." She hadn't expected such a thoughtful gesture.
Thank you, Luke.
"That's very kind of you," she said, touched by the simple act. She realized that she looked forward to his visits not just because of the conversations, but because of the sense of care he seemed to carry wherever he went. Days turned into weeks, and with each visit Maria felt a subtle shift within herself. She began to see the possibility of connection, of companionship, of being truly seen and appreciated for who she was. She noticed how much she enjoyed planning discussions with him, recommending books, or simply listening to his stories about ranch life. Her quiet home and her orderly routines, which had once felt like protective walls, began to feel like a welcoming space, one that could hold joy, laughter, and perhaps even love. One day, after a long discussion about the history of local farms, Luke asked Maria if she would like to take a walk with him through a nearby trail. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows and bathing the landscape in golden light. Maria hesitated at first. She hadn't taken walks like this with anyone in years, but something about Luke's gentle smile and relaxed presence made her agree. They walked side by side, talking about everything and nothing. Luke shared stories of his childhood on the ranch, of mornings spent feeding animals, of lessons learned from hard work and patience. Maria shared memories from her life in the town, of childhood adventures, books she had loved, and the small joys that had filled her days. The air was crisp, the leaves rustling underfoot, and the simple act of walking together felt like a step into a world Maria hadn't dared imagine she could be a part of. At one point, Luke paused and looked at her, his eyes soft but steady. "Maria," he said, "it's rare to meet someone who sees the world the way you do. I enjoy every moment I spend talking with you." Maria felt her heart flutter, especially ones that felt genuine and thoughtful rather than polite or fleeting. She found herself smiling, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Could it be possible that someone actually noticed her, appreciated her, and even admired her? She tried to hide the sudden rush of excitement, but she knew she couldn't ignore it.
That evening, Maria returned home feeling different. Her home seemed brighter, her routine less heavy, and her heart lighter than it had been in years.
She realized that her life, though predictable and calm, had room for new experiences, new connections, and new joys. She had met someone who saw her as more than invisible, someone who respected her, enjoyed her company, and valued her presence. Maria began to look forward to Luke's visits, to their walks, and to their conversations. She noticed little things, the way he remembered details she had mentioned weeks ago, the way he laughed at her stories, the way his presence seemed to fill the quiet spaces of her life with warmth. And though she still had moments of doubt, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, Life had a way of bringing surprises when you least expected them. As the autumn days continued, Maria felt a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in decades. Her heart, once quiet and cautious, was beginning to stir with hope. She began to see that connections could form slowly, gently, and meaningfully, and that age was not a barrier to being seen, appreciated, or even loved. Little did she know this was only the beginning. Luke's presence in her life was about to awaken feelings she had long forgotten, and he would show her that, even at 48, life could surprise her in the most beautiful ways. The days grew shorter, and the air turned cooler as autumn slowly gave way to winter. Maria's mornings at the library became brighter, not because of the sunlight streaming through the windows, but because of Luke's frequent visits. He had become a familiar presence, someone she looked forward to seeing, even on the busiest days. Each conversation with him seemed effortless, filled with warmth, laughter, and quiet moments of understanding that she had never experienced with anyone before. Luke had a way of listening that made Maria feel truly heard. He didn't just nod politely or wait for his turn to speak. He absorbed every word, every small detail, and often surprised her by remembering things she had said weeks earlier. He asked questions that showed he genuinely cared, not out of politeness but because he wanted to know her thoughts, her dreams, her little quirks. Maria, who had grown accustomed to being overlooked or underestimated, found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in decades. She shared stories from her childhood, memories of her parents, and even her moments of fear and regret, and Luke listened with a patience and gentleness that made her feel safe. One chilly afternoon, Luke brought a small gift. It was nothing extravagant, just a handmade bookmark with a painted sunflower on it. "I thought you might like this," he said, handing it to her with a shy smile. "For your favorite books." She took the bookmark, turning it over in her hands, noticing the care and effort put into it. "Thank you, Luke," she said softly. "It's beautiful," he shrugged, trying to appear casual, but Maria noticed the slight blush on his cheeks. "It's nothing, really. Just, I wanted you to have it." That evening, Maria placed the bookmark in her favorite novel and couldn't help but think about Luke. She realized that she was beginning to anticipate his visits, to notice the small details of his manner, the way he spoke, the way he smiled, and even the scent of the outdoors that seemed to follow him everywhere. Her heart, which had long been quiet and cautious, felt alive again. She didn't fully understand it yet, but a part of her knew that her life was changing in ways she had never expected. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened. Luke often invited Maria to his ranch, not for anything formal, but simply to show her the life he had built and to share experiences she had never known. The first time she visited, Maria felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The ranch was sprawling, with wide-open fields, wooden fences, and the gentle lowing of cattle in the distance. The crisp air carried the earthy scent of hay, soil, and animals. A world so different from the quiet streets of her town. Luke led her on a slow tour, showing her the barn where the horses were kept, the pens where cattle roamed, and the vegetable garden he tended himself. He explained the daily routines, the responsibilities, and the challenges of ranch life. Maria listened intently, fascinated by the rhythm of his days, the connection to the land, and the dedication he had to his work. She admired the way he moved, confident yet gentle, strong but careful.
As they walked through the fields, Luke paused and looked at her, his eyes soft in the fading light.
"Maria," he said, "I hope you know how much I enjoy your company. I've met many people in my life, but none quite like you. You have a way of seeing the world that's rare, and it makes everything better." Maria felt her heart flutter. But nothing like this, spoken with such sincerity.
"Luke, I thank you," she replied, unsure of what else to say.
She felt a mixture of embarrassment, happiness, and hope swirling inside her. They spent the afternoon doing simple tasks together, feeding the animals, checking fences, and gathering eggs from the chicken coop. Luke taught her small skills, guiding her patiently whenever she needed help. Maria laughed more than she had in years, feeling the joy of accomplishment and the warmth of shared moments. She realized that she felt more comfortable around Luke than she had around most people her entire life. As the sun began to set, they sat on a wooden fence overlooking the fields. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, reflecting off the rolling hills. Luke handed Maria a warm cup of cider he had prepared, and they sat in companionable silence. The air was crisp, but the warmth between them was undeniable.
Maria felt a sense of peace and belonging she had never known.
I never thought I would feel like this again, Maria admitted quietly, staring at the horizon.
I thought my life was too settled, too quiet, too late for new beginnings. Luke turned to her, his expression tender. Maria, life doesn't have an age limit. Love, connection, happiness, they don't come with an expiration date.
You're never too old to be wanted, to be seen, or to feel special. You've been worth waiting for.
The words struck Maria deeply. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she didn't try to hide it. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that she mattered, that she was seen, that her heart was capable of being touched again. She looked at Luke, really looked at him, and saw in his eyes the same sincerity and care she felt. Over the following days, Maria and Luke's connection grew even stronger. They shared breakfasts, walks, and quiet evenings together, each moment building trust, understanding, and affection. Maria found herself anticipating his messages and visits, thinking about him during quiet moments, and imagining a future she had never dared to dream of. She laughed more freely, spoke more openly, and felt lighter in ways she hadn't in decades. Luke also showed Maria a new perspective on life. He didn't rush her or pressure her. He allowed their relationship to grow naturally, with patience and respect. He celebrated her strengths, admired her independence, and encouraged her passions. Maria realized that she had spent so long believing she wasn't worthy of love that she had hidden herself away. But Luke's presence reminded her that worthiness was not defined by age or past experiences. It was inherent in who she was. One snowy evening, Luke invited Maria to help decorate the small ranch house for the holidays. They strung lights along the porch, hung wreaths on the doors, and arranged candles in the windows. Maria marveled at how much joy there was in the simple act of creating warmth and beauty together. She felt a sense of belonging, of home, that she had never experienced before. Luke's laughter filled the rooms, and Maria found herself laughing alongside him, letting go of the quiet caution she had always carried. As they sat by the fire that evening, sipping cocoa and watching the flames dance, Luke reached for Maria's hand. "You're more than I ever imagined, Maria," he said softly. "You've brought light into my life in a way I didn't even know I needed. And I want you to know, I care for you deeply." Maria felt her heart swell. She had never imagined hearing such words directed at her, and yet they felt true, sincere, and real. She squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. I care for you too, Luke," she whispered. "More than I thought I could." From that moment, their bond became undeniable. They shared hopes, fears, dreams, and laughter. Maria discovered that love was not about rushing grand gestures or youthful appearances. It was about connection, trust, and the willingness to open one's heart, even after years of solitude. Luke's steady presence reminded her that she was not too old to experience joy, affection, or companionship. In the quiet moments when they simply sat together, sharing stories or watching the sun rise and set over the fields, Maria realized that she had never felt more alive. The loneliness that had once been a constant companion began to fade, replaced by warmth, hope, and the certainty that she was seen, valued, not for her youth, but for the woman she had become. By the end of the season, Maria and Luke had built a connection that felt unshakable. They had shared work, laughter, conversation, and quiet reflection. Maria understood that love had found her not because she had searched desperately, but because she had remained open, patient, and true to herself. And Luke, with his gentle strength and unwavering patience, had shown her that life's surprises often come when they are least expected, but are most needed. Maria now looked forward to each day with a sense of excitement she had thought was long gone. She understood that being loved and wanted was not a matter of age, appearance, or timing. It was about hearts recognizing each other, about patience, and about the courage to embrace new possibilities. Luke had reminded her that life could be beautiful, even after decades of quiet living, and that sometimes the most unexpected relationships were the ones that changed everything. And so, as winter settled over the town, Maria found herself smiling more freely, laughing more easily, and opening her heart to a future she had never dared imagine. She had discovered that it was never too late to be wanted, and that love could arrive when she least expected it, transforming her life in ways she had long dreamed of but never truly believed possible. Winter had settled into the town, covering the streets, rooftops, and fields in a soft blanket of snow. The library was quieter than usual, with only a few visitors stopping by each day. Maria had grown accustomed to the peaceful rhythm of her life, but now it was different. Each morning, as she unlocked the library doors, she thought of Luke. She thought of his smile, his calm voice, and the gentle way he had entered her life.
There was a new warmth in her heart, one that made ordinary days feel extraordinary.
Luke had become a constant in her life, not just through his visits, but in the way he seemed to care for her every thought, feeling, and dream.
He had a way of noticing the small details, the way Maria's hands moved as she organized books, the faint laugh that escaped her lips when she was happy, the way her eyes lit up when she shared a story. It was as if he could see into the quiet corners of her heart, places she had long thought were invisible to everyone. One Saturday morning, Luke stopped by the library with a basket of fresh-baked pastries. "I thought you might enjoy some breakfast," he said, placing the basket carefully on her desk. "No rush today. I was hoping we could spend some time together." Maria felt a smile spread across her face. "That sounds wonderful," she said, feeling a lightness in her chest that had not been there for years. Settled in one of the quiet corners of the library, sharing coffee and pastries, their conversation flowing easily. They spoke about simple things, books they loved, favorite memories, the changing seasons, and yet each word felt meaningful. Maria noticed how naturally their lives had begun to intertwine, how effortless it was to be with him. She thought back to the years she had spent alone, wondering if love had passed her by, and realized that those years had prepared her for this moment. She was ready to appreciate someone fully, without hesitation or fear.
After breakfast, Luke suggested they take a walk through the nearby park.
The snow crunched under their boots as they wandered along the familiar paths, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Luke pointed out the delicate patterns frost had left on the branches, the tiny footprints of birds in the snow, and the soft glow of the sun reflecting off the icy ponds. Maria laughed at his excitement, feeling her own joy grow in response. As they walked, Luke took her hand gently, holding it with care. "Maria," he said softly, "I want you to know something important. Being with you, it feels like coming home. I've waited for someone like you my whole life, even if I didn't know it at first. You've been worth waiting for." Maria's heart swelled. She had long believed she was too old to be desired, too settled in her life to find someone who truly cared. Yet here he was, expressing the very feeling she had dreamed of for decades. Tears threatened to fall, but she didn't try to hide them.
Instead, she squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth and sincerity in his words. I've never felt this way before, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. I thought my chance at happiness had passed, but you've shown me it hasn't.
You've reminded me that life can surprise us, even after all these years. Luke smiled, brushing a snowflake from her hair.
Life has a funny way of giving us exactly what we need when we least expect it. And I'm so glad it gave me you.
Over the next few months, their relationship blossomed.
Luke invited Maria to his ranch regularly, where she learned more about his world, feeding the animals, helping with small chores, and even riding horses under his careful guidance. Maria discovered a strength and courage within herself she hadn't realized she possessed. She loved the simplicity of ranch life, the connection to the land, and the joy of sharing these experiences with Luke. Each task they did together, no matter how small, became a memory etched in her heart.
Back in the town, the community noticed the change in Maria. She walked with a lighter step, her laughter more frequent, her eyes brighter.
Friends who had long hoped she would find companionship smiled knowingly when she spoke of Luke. They could see the love and respect between them, the way he treated her with gentleness and admiration, and the way she had opened her heart fully to the possibility of happiness. As Christmas approached, Luke asked Maria to help him prepare the ranch for the holiday season. They decorated the house with lights, wreaths, and garlands. The warmth of the fire, the scent of pine, and the soft glow of candles made the ranch feel cozy and inviting. They spent hours laughing, untangling strings of lights, and placing ornaments on a small, lovingly decorated tree. Maria felt a sense of belonging she had never known before, a feeling that the world was brighter and more magical because he was in it. On Christmas Eve, after a long day of decorating and preparing, they sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the snow fall softly over the fields. Luke turned to her, his eyes serious yet tender. "Maria," he said, "I know we've only known each other a short time, but it feels like I've known you forever. You've brought joy into my life in ways I didn't think were possible. I want to share every moment with you, if you'll have me."
Maria felt her breath catch.
The depth of his words, the sincerity in his gaze, and the love she felt in her heart made her realize that this was exactly what she had been waiting for. Someone who saw her, valued her, and wanted to build a life together. "Luke, I want that too," she whispered, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. From that moment, their relationship became inseparable. They shared meals, walks, stories, and dreams. Luke continued to show patience and understanding, never rushing Maria, always valuing her thoughts and feelings. Maria, in turn, embraced life with renewed energy, discovering joy in simple moments and feeling the excitement of a future filled with love. Spring arrived, bringing warmth and renewal to the town and the ranch. The snow melted, flowers bloomed, and the fields turned green once more. Maria and Luke spent long days outdoors, planting gardens, tending to animals, and walking through the countryside. Each day was a reminder that life could begin anew at any age, that happiness was possible even after years of solitude, and that love could arrive unexpectedly, but with perfect timing. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Luke led Maria to a quiet spot overlooking the fields. He had set up a small picnic with lanterns and a blanket. The air was warm with a gentle breeze, and the sky glowed in shades of pink and orange. Luke took Maria's hands in his and looked into her eyes. "Maria," he said softly, "you've shown me the beauty of life, the importance of patience, and the strength of a kind heart. I don't want a day to go by without you in my life."
You've been worth waiting for every single moment. Tears filled Maria's eyes, but she smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace and joy.
"Luke, I've waited too, in my own way. And now, I know that love doesn't have an age, and that happiness can arrive when we least expect it. I want to spend every day with you." They embraced, feeling the warmth of their love and the promise of a future together. It was a quiet, simple moment, but it carried all the weight of the years they had lived, the lessons they had learned, and the hope they now shared. From that day forward, Maria and Luke built a life filled with laughter, companionship, and shared adventures. They attended community events together, hosted small gatherings at the ranch, and continued to explore the countryside hand in hand.
Maria discovered that love was not about grand gestures or fleeting passion. It was about trust, respect, and the willingness to open one's heart fully.
Luke showed her that true connection was patient, kind, and enduring.
Maria's friends noticed a transformation in her. The quiet librarian who had once been reserved and cautious now walked with confidence and joy. She laughed freely, spoke openly about her happiness, and radiated a warmth that came from being loved and appreciated. Luke, patient and steady, remained her partner, confidant, and greatest supporter. As the seasons changed again, Maria reflected on her journey. She had once believed that life had passed her by, that love was something for younger people, and that her days of being wanted were long gone. But Luke had shown her that life's surprises could arrive at any age, that happiness was possible, and that the heart could open again, even after decades of waiting. Together they embraced the future with hope, gratitude, and love. Maria had learned that it was never too late to be wanted, to be valued, or to experience the joy of true companionship. And Luke had found in her a partner who was not only beautiful and kind, but also strong, wise, and capable of deep love. Their story became a quiet inspiration in the town, a reminder that love could arrive when least expected, that patience and openness could lead to extraordinary happiness, and that life's most meaningful moments were often found in the simple shared experiences of the heart. And so Maria, the woman who had once thought she was too old to be wanted, found herself cherished, loved, and celebrated. With Luke by her side, she discovered that life's surprises were not just possible. They were worth waiting for. And sometimes, the most unexpected gifts were the ones that changed everything.